on today's edition of Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards. Our guest for this episode is Jim Tracy. Jim Tracy is one of the highest demand influencers and speakers on workplace culture in North America. He combines real-life CEO experience with candid stories about resilience and team building. He has testified before the United States House of Representatives. At the age of 62, Tracy began flying jets. He has also completed over 350 podcasts and authored 3 books.
And if you choose to do the right thing, life is going to be better. And character is simply a long string of choices. And if you show me a person who tries to do the right thing on a regular basis, and I'll show you a person who's got a better life, and I'll show you a person who people look up to and people admire and in some cases revere.
Let's join today's episode with businessman, pilot, and grandpa Jim Tracy.
You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thanks for joining me for the podcast where personal stories can have a global impact. Our guest today is host of the Grampian podcast. It's the Grampian himself, Jim Tracy. Hello, Jim, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Melvin, thanks for asking me on. What an honor it is to be on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for saying that. So let's start by talking about your family. You've been married almost 5 decades. You have 5 children and 16 grandchildren. So we're going to start out with a test. Can you name each of your grandkids in order of their birth?
Yeah, but there's 2 new ones, so it's going to be 16 shortly. But there's Gus, Colby, Wes, and Brock, and then Landon, Addison, Jalea, so they all go by nicknames, so I'm having trouble. And then we've got after Jalea is Paisley and Knox and Rayleigh, Ren, Holly, and now coming up Remy, and I don't know the other one that's in the womb yet. I forgot the name because it's a little different for me. So forgive me.
Okay. Well, that's close. I'll say you can continue being the Grampian since you know your grandkids' names. Tell me how. I'll give you a pass. Right. So tell me how the name Grampian came about. I believe one of your grandkids gave you that name. Is that correct?
It was so cool. We were sitting at a lake cabin and I was playing cribbage. I teach my grandkids to play math with cribbage, or to learn math by playing cribbage. But there's no mercy. You don't get wins. You don't get. There's no gimmies. And I beat Wesley pretty good. And Wesley is an intensely competitive young man. And he stood up and he's pretty frustrated and he said, "You're not a grandpa." And I'm like, "Oh no, what?" And he says, "And you're not a champion." And I was kind of like, "Okay, whatever, man. I might not be champion, but I beat you." And he got that wry Wesley smile and he said, "You're the Grampian." And it stuck. And it's it's become like a moniker and a badge of honor and a source of pride and all that stuff.
Grandpa names are the best. I'm a grandfather too, and my grandfather name started out being Cool Papa Mel. If you know cool Papa Bell from the Negro Leagues, and it's just short. They eventually shortened it to Papa Mel, and that's what my grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Papa Mel. All right.
So that being a grandpa is the best. I'm sure you will.
My father-in-law was Grandpa Mel, so we're okay. We're both in good company.
Yes, that's awesome. All right, so why did you start flying airplanes, and then why did you advance to jets?
Wow. When we started our business, I got a chance to go back to South Dakota to visit my dad, and I pointed up in the sky. There was a little, 172 Cessna up there, and I kind of asked my dad, when was the last time you were up in one of those? Because I had taken a flight with him when I was a very small child, and he said, wow, it was a lot of years ago. It was with your grandpa and John, and they took me around and they showed me all of the old haunts and hunting spots and farm grounds and all this stuff that brought back memories. And he kind of shook his head wistfully and he said, I'd give anything to do that again. And he told me that in April. I went back to Bremerton, Washington and studied hard. And in October, I took him on a flight in South Dakota. I flew into his home airport and picked him up with my son Major, and we went on that a very similar flight. And then I got some more training, and I advanced to a larger aircraft because I could accommodate antennas for our cellular business in that aircraft, and I could respond quicker than anybody. So we had a branch in Eastern Washington and in Western Washington, and we just out-serviced everybody. And it's not the kind of thing where it's ever going to pay for itself, but boy, do customers remember your name when you bail them out, even when they don't even know you used an airplane. And then we started a branch in Boise, and I was flying we had a branch near Bozeman, Montana, in a little town called Three Forks. I was flying one day from Bozeman, Montana to home in Boise, and I was over the River of No Return wilderness area in a single engine. And I looked down and I thought, you know what? If I lose this engine, this actually is going to be the river of no return because there's no place to land and they're never going to find me. And I got home and I heard that phrase that every pilot wants to hear. And that is, honey, I think you need a twin. So we moved into a twin engine and we sold our business into a private equity group, and we started the process of traveling a bit. Our power is flickering here, so you're probably picking that up. I had to be in Spokane and Seattle and Bozeman and Denver and New Braunfels, Texas, like once a month from Boise. And so it was right when our friends at the Department of Health called COVID a gig. And so I just didn't want to do TSA. So we moved into a jet and haven't looked back since, and having a ball. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you mentioned New Braunfels, Texas. I live 10 miles from New Braunfels.
Yeah. I saw that in Austin, man. So you got a lovely little airport there in New Braunfels. I got some great friends down there.
Okay. Yeah. New Braunfels is a great place. Anybody who likes German culture, actually, it's big enough now that it's outgrown its original heritage, German heritage, but it still has a lot of roots. And it's a fun place. I recommend people coming to visit New Braunfels. So you started your business in your garage, like a lot of high-tech corporations used to do back in the 70s. How did you grow your company?
You know, we started with just two of us, and we learned along the way. I mean, I do some seminars now, and I call it training by trauma. And when you learn to do the right thing and just keep repeating that, it kind of is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We always try to set the bar a little higher than all of our competitors, but a little higher than our own bar. So our folks who worked with us, and we didn't really have employees. We just it was long before associates was a popular term, but we had friends and brothers and comrades in arms that we worked with in a high risk business. And we just set the bar a little higher every time. And every time we hit that bar, we'd nudge it up a little again. And so if you can just be better, faster, stronger, higher quality, safer, and do it on a regular basis, people are going to come and they're going to buy stuff from you. And that's what I found out. And then add quality people. It's so important. I've watched people in this hiring cycle where they just continue to hire people and recycle people, and they never take the time to grow their own. And I am so proud in the business that my son and I founded that most of the people who've been there for a long time are actually running the business, and they're 20 plus years in the same business, but not in the same role. Have guys start out at the, in the cellular tower business or the communications tower business. We say you start at the top because you start climbing and you work your way down, as opposed to working your way up the ladder. But all of our guys that started with us have worked their way down the tower into positions of, president and vice president.
Wow, that's impressive. So are you satisfied with where your company is now? Do you see other areas of growth?
My role changed so much when we moved into private equity into that model and merged it with other companies. I'm still in an equity position there, but I'm no longer a part of any active day-to-day management. Sometimes they call me when they need a little advice, but I'm on the speaking circuit and I'm writing and I'm enjoying helping people be what they want to be. And by trying to influence them anyway.
All right, and you have deep roots in nonprofit charitable enterprises. Do you consider giving back to be an important part of the free market?
Wow, what a terrific question. When we give, I've found that the most satisfying things that I've done over the course of a close to 40-year career now. No, it is a 40-plus year career now. I really circle the wagons around helping people who are at their most vulnerable. And I can point to multiple times. The Tower Family Foundation is one where when someone gets hurt on a communications tower site, it's usually pretty bad. Most of them are falls from elevation or, just really bad stuff. And when that happens, there's a gap of time that the system doesn't kick in to take care of their families. And a lot of time there's, these are blue collar jobs and there's rent to pay or groceries to buy or car payments to make. And so we just step in within 7 days and we cut a check to the family for the most that's allowed by the IRS without throwing them into a different tax bracket or something like that. And so we give them the biggest gift that the IRS allows and we do it quickly. And we don't make it, we don't make a big deal of it. We just do the right thing. And there's lots of stories like that where we focus in the nonprofits that I have been a part of on the dignity of the people involved. Another one that I'm really proud of is called TATE. It's the Telecommunications Against Trafficking and Exploitation. And there's just a guy called me and he said, "Hey, this is a good thing to do. Let's do this." And so a fellow by that, shout out to Kenny Blakesley from Sacramento, California. Kenny called me and we started what's called TATE. And all it does is provide free or no cost, nothing's free, but no cost training for telecom workers to recognize human trafficking when they see it, and then just pick up the phone and call the human trafficking, hotline so that somebody who's got the equipment can do something about it. And the wonderful thing is it's had an effect.
Nice.
So is it part of giving back? Absolutely. Is it the most satisfying part of? I had a lot of guys working for me, and they enabled me to go to work on behalf of other people in endeavors like this. And so it's a salute to them. It's a salute to the people who've been helped. Another organization called Pilots for Christ that we just, when people ask for a free flight, that's because all the other options are gone. And when all the other options are gone, and we do some more flights for folks who have been human trafficked. And I was like, well, why do they need a private flight? I mean, there's part of me that's a skeptic. I'm like, dude, so good, you're out of human trafficking. Why do you need a flight? Well, the first thing a trafficker will steal is your ID, your identity. And so they go to the airport, they don't have a driver's license. They can't even get on an airplane. Sometimes they're trying to get away from somebody bad. Sometimes they're trying to go testify against somebody bad. Sometimes they're just trying to relocate their families who will try to care for them and pull them out of the cesspool that is in America today. So all these folks who work for me have allowed me to kind of step in and be the hero, but they're really the heroes, Melvin. They are the ones who enabled that and made it possible.
Well, that's awesome work you're doing. Congratulations on that. And I pray that you can continue doing that and helping people wherever they are.
Yeah. Hey, man, when you get to be my age, you get two choices. You can go golf. Nah. No thanks, man. I'm gonna go be vibrant and live an audaciously big life. And when I talk to folks about that, they're like, "Whoa! I mean, you can do that? Of course you can do that. We can be relevant." I mean, I met a guy the other day. We took him duck hunting last fall. He's 89 years old and he's living a huge life. And I'm like, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy. So we're going to keep going, man.
So what are your goals from here on out until you reach 120 years old?
Wow. Number one, when you're a pilot, at 65, the FAA kind of says, you can't do that. You can't do that for money anymore. So, and I never did, but you want to be able to be safe. You want to be able to keep flying. I want to impact the groups. When I go out and I do speeches, I don't like a lot of people who are professional speakers go out and they motivate people. It's a very noble thing to do. I want to do something more. I want to impact them in such a way that they make a decision. And that decision that they're going to help and they're going to make their workplace better, they're going to make their community better. We're going to try and impact them so that they affect change right where they are, so that this world can be a bit better place. And that's really true cross-generationally. The business groups I speak to, a lot of times you get guys like me that are boomers and they're looking down that nose, they're looking at those X's and those millennials and they're saying, well, those guys are no good. And the millennials are looking down at the Generation Ys and they're going, no, those are the really no good ones. And they're looking down at the Zulus and the Alphas and on and on. We have 6 generations in the workforce. And I look at my own history from my grandfather all the way to my youngest grandkid. There's 7 generations there. And guess what? I got along with all of them. And so what I do is I teach people that we need to do 3 things. We need to listen generously. We need to build relationships. And then we need to give respect. But that respect doesn't have to be earned first. It has to be given so that it can be received and then earned, maybe. And then if it's not earned, maybe we can go back and we can do a little more communicating and we can do a little bit more relationship building and we can make sure that they get an awesome opportunity to earn that respect.
So speaking of respect, I understand you've testified before Congress. Did you go and talk to them about being more respectful?
There's an old saying about pearls before swine, and I'm funning a little bit when I say that. But I sat in front of this hearing as I'm a knuckle dragon tower guy, and when they asked questions, they said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a yes or no question. Is there enough time and is there enough money to repack the spectrum for broadcasting in what we've given you to do that?" And I'm like, well, that's probably a great question, but that's not a question for me. My job is to make sure that we do it safely. And so we walked into the opportunity that we have to actually change the marketplace, but do it in a safe manner. And after it was done, there was a fellow, a congressman, I won't name him, but he's from New Jersey, and his chief of staff ran down, he got right in my face, and he says, when he asks you a yes or no question, you give a yes or no answer. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So I didn't teach them anything about courtesy, man. But you know what? I spoke the truth, and I hope that sometimes that'll rub off on people.
You hope so. You hope so. Sometimes you may not see the outcome, but you hope you've had an impact.
There you go.
So why do they call you the curator of culture?
I was working for a client out in the Midwest, and when I came in, a lot of consultants, they'll walk into the front door and they'll climb up the ivory tower and they'll ask what's wrong. And when I work with companies, I usually kind of throw on a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt and I go in the back door and I wait for somebody to say, who are you and why are you here? And at this particular organization, I walked in and I was like mixing with all their employees and nobody even bothered to ask me who I was or why I was there. And I thought, wow, this is probably not good. And so when later the afternoon, I actually went out to a job site with one of their crews, and I talked to the people out in the field. And then I went back and I got my collared shirt on. And at that time, I went up into the offices and what I call the ivory tower. And I said, you know what? You have a bunch of people there that should be looking out for one another, but they don't understand what a tribe is. And if you will look at what it takes to build a tribal culture and make them stand up for one another, if they'll stand up for one another and then you love them, they'll stand up for you. And within a matter of weeks, we had flipped that company around from not having a tribal culture to convincing the CEO, owner, and president, which was a family business, that when they love their people, here's what it looks like. And then we came alongside them, and I could say, hey, man, we went and cooked burgers for them. Well, that's true, but we did more than that. I taught a stiff old dude how to greet his people with a hug. And in American business and in American culture, they're like, well, dude, you can't hug somebody. I'm like, well, actually, there's nothing wrong with that. And given in the right context, if I walk in any of my old shops, you're going to see guys that are bruisers. And they walk up and they're like, Jim, how are you? And they throw their arms around me. And some of them lift me clean off the ground. And I'm a tote to lift. But what we do, and the reason that name, the Curator of Culture, came, is they said, man, you turned this around in such a short time. I'm like, no, I did not. You did. And I couldn't do it. You had to do it. And he said, well, you're the Curator of Culture. And he said this in front of his people. And at first I was like, oh, Curator, that's like a dead museum guy or something. And then he told me, he said, no, Curator is the Latin and it means to care for. And so you are that, he said, you are the dude who cares for culture, the Curator of Culture. And so it's kind of one of those things. It's like the Grampian. When he first said it, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I like that. But after he said it and after he defined it, I was like, man, you can't get a better gift than someone who gives you a name that you're proud of. Kind of like, if your dad or your grandpa hands down the legacy of a name that you can be proud of, it's a big deal.
The Grampian, the Curator of Culture. You got two right there. That's a nameplate, thick nameplate right there for your desk.
Well, I just use one for family and one for business. How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds great. All right, so companies, a lot of interviews, they're asking people these days about ambiguity and how they function within that type of situation. And you use the word uncertainty. So how do you, or why do you encourage people to embrace uncertainty?
Well, Melvin, I look at the body politic today, and it's probably a little more certain than it was a while ago, but it's really uncertain. Let me just say, if tariffs continue the way they are, well, we won't know what's going to happen. If elections keep going the way they go, we're not going to know what's going to happen. If interest rates change, well, wait, they're going to. If the Fed decides, well, they're going to too. Everything around us is uncertain. So if we learn the Marines do a really good job. The plan is perfect until the first bullet flies. Or as Mike Tyson said, every fight plan is perfect until somebody gets hit in the face. Hey, we're always in a fight in business. It's a capitalistic society. And what we have to do is make sure that we're ready for the change. So if you freak out every time change happens, well, then you're just freaking out all the time. So why don't you look forward and say, if this happens, then I will. Or if this doesn't happen, then I will. And prepare your people to say, you know what, we're going to be adaptable, we're going to be flexible, and when change comes, and it will come, we are going to overcome it. And we're going to overcome it through a superior strategy because we need to know where we're going. You don't know your destination, it's going to be hard to find a path there. So if you know where you're going, hey man, we can take a different road, a different bridge. We can take a different mode. Sometimes you take a truck, sometimes you take a rail, sometimes you take an airplane, but we're going to the destination. And you focus on a strategic destination, and then, hey, doesn't matter what comes up. You're going to get your people there. Get them on board.
Okay. So why did you feel there was a need for a book about building men?
Whoa. Number one, the older I get, the more I'm learning to be grateful. And one of the things that I'm the most grateful for is found in that book. Every chapter focuses on a singular character trait. Leadership is one. I learned that from someone, and I learned it because someone invested in me, and they invested in me when they probably didn't have the time. They probably were a little short on energy, but they looked at me and they thought, wow, this loser needs some help. And so I look across generations, and I start with my grandpa, and I go all the way down to one of the last chapters is about courage. And it's my son Major, who served on an overseas deployment, and he showed me what courage really looks like. So all those things are a way to say thank you to the people who invested in me, and then to take those lessons and make them available to everybody else. Because there's not enough men out there who are building men. And that's where the title really came from. My son Ryan is my business partner. He was doing a magazine interview, and I think it was a magazine. Anyway, they asked him, so what is it that you do now? He said, well, I used to build towers. I built guide towers. I built self-supporters. I built monopoles. I built glue lamp structures. There ain't any kind of tower I haven't built, and I'm pretty good at it. But now I build men, and I build men who build towers. And what he was saying was that his role and the thing that he did as a function of not only growing our business, but investing in other people is he mentored them and he invested in them. And so the title, I don't even get credit for the title, man. But the book it's starting to be received, and I'm overwhelmed, frankly, by the response, and it isn't even out in store. It won't even be out in stores until June 2nd. And so, so right before Father's Day, and man, if you want to buy something for your kids or your dad or your grandpa, hopefully you can find it.
All right. So is there some discussion in the book about conquering fears? I understand that you help people to conquer their fears.
Well, I don't know that is specifically addressed in the book, but the reason that people ask me about that a lot of times, which I'm sure that you drew something from, is that I grew up a pretty fearful person, and if you look at, I'm a keynote speaker. I get up on stage in front of thousands of people, and everybody's like, "Doesn't that make you scared?" I'm like, "Yes." And no, it used to make me really scared because when I was a little kid, Sister Elzir at my parochial school went to my mother and she said, your son stutters and he's got a math disability, and we think we're going to recommend that you send him. In those days, they called it the State School for Retarded Citizens. And so we're going to send him there. And that stuttering was kind of an issue, and the math thing was even a bigger issue. But I had a mom who said, oh, no, you're not. And so that was a vote for me. And people continue to vote for me. And when I was a senior in high school, I really was not very comfortable in my own skin, and I had broken my arm. And my dad said, hey, you can go in this contest, and this contest involves prepared speech. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he sat down, and he was a busy guy. He had 8 kids, but he actually helped me write a speech, and I gave it, and I won a state prepared speech contest, and it sent me to nationals, and I did okay there. I didn't win it, but man, I was state champion at prepared speech. So that's one of the things that I think is evidence that if someone's scared about something, they need to be a little bit counterphobic. Just get up and do it. And I was scared of heights, and I started a tower business. I was not really a comfortable flyer, and I learned how to fly airplanes. So if it can be done, it can be done. It's just a matter of what you're going to do to get there. And so fear is one of the best tools in my arsenal. And I'm hoping that I can teach other people to put it to use for them as well.
All right. So why is character so important to you?
Wow. There's a fellow who is a principal, or he was a principal at a middle school, grade school, I think even a little bit of high school, back in Western Washington. His name is Dennis. Every time, every day, someone walks in the door, every student gets to shake hands with the principal every day. And he says to him one simple sentence. He says, just do the right thing. Next one comes in, just do the right thing. Next one comes in, just do the right thing. And it gets old for them. And even some of my kids were like, this is the stupidest thing ever. But what he did is he reinforced that everything you do, everywhere you go, every decision you make, every non-decision you make, all have consequences. And if you choose to do the right thing, life is going to be better. And character is simply a long string of choices. And if you show me a person who tries to do the right thing on a regular basis, and I'll show you a person who's got a better life. And I'll show you a person who people look up to and people admire and in some cases revere. I'm so encouraged by this latest generation of alphas, because they're coming up to people like me. I mean, I'm a baby boomer, for crying out loud. And these people are like, even 12 years old, and they come up and they're looking and they're aching for mentors, because it started with my generation. We fostered the first group of latchkey kids who came home and mom wasn't there. And it has just gotten progressively worse until this latest group of alphas, and they're begging for mentors. And they want people to teach them to do the right thing. And that is a thing of noble character. So it's the most important thing I look for. I can teach skills. I don't ever have a problem. Show me a guy who'll make good decisions. I can turn him into a pilot. Doesn't matter what he is, what he does, if he can see, I can make him into a pilot. Yeah. So character, number one, always number one, never number two.
All right. Excuse me. You talked about mentoring, and I had a guest on a couple months ago, and she founded the Mentor Project, and I ended up joining, and I recommend you look into it too if you have the opportunity. But for anybody else here who's listening, look into some kind of mentoring. opportunity, it'll help you, and it definitely helps younger generations too. So I concur with what you're saying there. So what do you mean?
Melvin,
go ahead.
It really doesn't stop. It doesn't stop at work. A lot of people make it about work. In that book, I talked about my grandpa. And so old people can impact young people. I talk about my dad. I talk about my brothers. I talk about people who I worked with. I talk about my children. I talk about people who worked for me. All of them in some way, shape, or form mentored me because they came alongside. There's a Greek word called parakaleos, and it means to come alongside. And when you come alongside someone, you're not coming on top of them, in front of them, behind them, under them. You're coming alongside them. And you're saying, hey, if I had a little bit of a better way, would you be interested in learning that? And so I long to be mentored today, not just the other way around. So, and it's not just about work. You're so spot on, man. Anybody can do it.
All right. So what do you mean by management by Cliché?
So my business partner, Eric Chase, came up with a saying. He said, we just do management by Cliché. And I looked around and I saw all these cliches that had come to us they were proven proverbs in business that were always true, really without regard to circumstance or industry. And when you think about all of the cliches that have come out, even in our own little business, we made a living off of cheap little cheesy cliches that I came up with. One I learned from an accounting lady in a previous career, and I took it to the cell tower business. And what we said, we were in an industry that was hurry, 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 hurry. And it's always got to get done before the day is done, before the week is done, before the month is done, before the quarter is out, before the next budget cycle, whatever. It's always a hurry. And so we started to be contrary to that a little bit by saying perfect is better than early. And people began to understand that, like, if we promise you that it'll be done on Wednesday, well, we're really shooting for Tuesday, but we're going to leave one day's grace in case something goes awry. And we're going to make sure that it's really ready and that we've cleaned everything up and everything. And so perfect is better than early became really a mantra of our company that exists 24 years later. And it has served not only us, but the 180 people or however many there are who still work there, as well as the other 600 that work in the rest of the business. Because all that, when you get a good mantra, man, it carries over time and it outlives you. So I'm pretty thrilled with that. And we've got a book coming out. It'll come out, I think, in September, called Management by Cliché. And I'm really proud of it, but it was really easy to write because we lived it for 30 years.
Yeah, that sounds interesting too. So you talked about speaking in front of groups. Do you speak to them about things like cliches and being a Grampian and all the other things that you've lived by over the years?
Yeah. So here's what I found in speaking. I'm not your traditional rah-rah. I got a lot of energy. And when I get on stage, I get pretty juiced. I get pretty jacked. But the reason I do is I have taken a lot of time and I have studied the audience. And so say you work for an association and you hire me to come in and I just did a little talk for an association and they asked me to come in. I absolutely had no idea what their business was. So I went and I found out. And then and here again, I went in the back door and I talked to their people and I'm like, so what challenges are there in your business? And 85% of business is all the same. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. And what I found is they got problems with people and process and product. And I'm stealing from one of those fellas on TV, but you can narrow those down. And people problems generally go right to the top. You can't have a great organization unless you have people who love people who work for them, who work under them, who work for them, who work with them. And then I found out in this particular instance that it was, as you do a little deeper dive, it was generally true that people were not trusted. Well, Melvin, if I came to you and I said, I really like your podcast. You're doing a bang-up job. And here's the 10 things that I'm going to fix because I don't trust you to do it yourself. What kind of message am I sending? It's just, it's like, I know more than you? Well, that's seldom the case. The boots on the ground generally know how to do their job. We need to retrain American leadership to extend respect and to add trust. And when we do that, it changes a lot of dynamics in the workplace. But the big key, I think, goes back to what I said before, is generous listening. I really try to go in and listen. There's a fellow I know by the name of Clint Pulver, and he calls himself the millennial, the undercover millennial. And you should have him on your podcast. He's awesome.
I haven't heard of him, but I'll look him up.
He went into a sporting goods store and he said, and he's got his cap on backwards, he's got the blonde hair going and the right clothes and all that. He doesn't look like a Grampian, but he walks in there and he says, "Hey, I got a question. What do you love about your job?" And he interviewed like 1,000 people. And then he took those results to the owner of that store and he said, "You know what? People who work for you, they hate their job." Well, imagine that. He was able to help that company turn around. And Clint is a great example of generous listening.
It's funny that you use that term because you're the.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're the second guest I've had this week who's used that term. Generous listening.
I thought I made it up.
You made it up on different ends of the country because this person is on the East Coast. So
right on.
So well, either way, it's a good term. It's a good term. I like it. All right, for our last question of the day, what advice do you want to leave with the listeners?
Wow, it's so huge. I have learned in business over 40 years, and I'm presuming that this is a question that relates to my tenure. And so I have learned in business that if you just do the right thing at the right time for the right reason, it's going to be all right. And that really focus has to not worry about whether someone's going to get mad at you. If you do the right thing and someone gets mad at you, you're probably working at the wrong place. And so I would just love to take a lot of the fear that's in the American workplace and just strip it away because it's not necessary, especially if you're just trying to do the right thing. And that would be my encouragement. But secondly, if you're getting a little bit longer in the tooth and you're thinking about Social Security, and I mean, I'm on Medicare. I can't complain at all. But you know what? I'm going to continue to live a big, audacious life, and I want some of you old farts to come and join me. Those folks on the younger set can learn a whole bunch from us, Melvin, and it's our job to impart that wisdom. You know, wisdom is the intersection of knowledge and application, and when we teach them what we know, they get some low tuition learning that we paid a lot of money for.
Or got a lot of scars for.
There you go. Well, training by trauma, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Jim. I enjoyed this conversation. Our guest today has been the Grampian, host of the Grampian podcast, and businessman Jim Tracy. Jim, thanks so much for being here today.
Man, my pleasure. What a joy.
Please go to my website at podcastreallife.com for more information about my guest and the things we discussed today, including links to his books. That's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.
That was Stories from Real Life. Join us again next week for another great storytelling journey. See you next time.